A Werewolf Shifter Romance, written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1. Eclipse Born. The silver moonlight filtered through the hospital windows as Maya Frost pulled her worn jacket tighter against the December chill. At 22, she had learned to navigate the world with careful steps, always watching, always hiding. The night shift at Mercy General had ended 3 hours ago, but her second job at the downtown diner wouldn't start for another 6 hours. Time enough to catch a few hours of sleep in her cramped studio apartment. 4 years. 4 years since she'd been cast out from Silver Creek Pack. Labeled as cursed, dangerous, unwanted, the memory still burned like acid in her chest. The way Alpha Garrett had looked at her with pure disgust. The whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. The fear in their eyes when animals began acting strangely around her. Born during the eclipse. Her mother used to whisper, stroking her hair. Special, not cursed. Never let them tell you otherwise, my little wolf. But her mother was gone now. Another casualty of Maya's so-called curse. The accident had been ruled natural causes, but Maya knew better. She had seen the hatred in the pack's eyes, felt their relief when Elena Frost was found at the bottom of Raven's Gorge. One less voice defending the cursed child. The world of shapeshifters operated on strict hierarchies that humans never suspected. 5 major packs controlled the territories surrounding the city, each with their own alpha, their own laws, their own prejudices. Silver Creek had been the most traditional, the most unforgiving. Alpha Garrett ruled with an iron fist, believing in ancient superstitions and bloodline purity. To him, Maya represented everything wrong with modern shifting. Unpredictable, uncontrollable, tainted by forces beyond understanding. She had tried to make peace with her human life. 3 jobs kept her barely afloat. The hospital, the diner, and weekend shifts at a local veterinary clinic. The irony wasn't lost on her that she found more acceptance among humans than she ever had with her own kind. Dr. Martinez at the clinic often commented on her natural way with injured animals, how even the most aggressive dogs calmed in her presence. If only he knew the truth. Maya's ancient Honda coughed to life in the hospital parking garage, the engine protesting against the bitter cold. The weather forecast had called for snow, but this felt different, heavier, more ominous, the kind of storm that trapped people in places they didn't want to be. The drive home normally took 20 minutes through the winding mountain roads, but tonight felt endless. Snow had begun falling in thick, heavy flakes that made visibility nearly impossible. Maya leaned forward, gripping the steering wheel as she navigated the treacherous curves that led to her apartment complex. She had always known she was different, even before the exile. Other shifter children could transform completely by their 15th birthday. But Maya remained stuck between worlds, human in appearance but with senses that betrayed her true nature. She could smell emotions, hear heartbeats from across rooms, feel the wild call that pulled at her soul during full moons. Yet her wolf remained locked inside, as if something fundamental was missing. The prophecy that sealed her fate had been whispered among the elders for generations. When eclipse shadows fall upon a child's birth, the ancient blood awakens. Beast Speaker returns to bridge the worlds, but darkness follows in her wake. They had decided she was the darkness, not the bridge. Maya's phone buzzed against the passenger seat. Another unpaid bill. Another reminder of how precarious her existence had become. She reached for it without thinking, taking her eyes off the road for just a moment. The deer appeared from nowhere, its eyes reflecting her headlights like twin moons. Maya yanked the steering wheel hard to the right, but the icy road offered no grip. The Honda spun in a slow, sickening circle before sliding sideways into a massive pine tree with a sound like breaking bones. Silence settled over the mountain road like a burial shroud. Steam rose from the crumpled hood as snow continued to fall, already beginning to cover the wreckage. Maya's head throbbed where it had struck the side window, and something warm trickled down her temple. Her door was jammed shut, the frame bent beyond recognition. She had to get out, had to find help. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and her human body wouldn't survive the night exposed to the elements. Using her shoulder, Maya forced the passenger door open and stumbled into the storm. The cold hit her like a physical blow, cutting through her thin jacket and scrubs as if they were made of paper. Her ankle twisted on the uneven ground, sending sharp pain shooting up her leg. Blood from the head wound had frozen in her hair, and each breath felt like swallowing ice. No cell service. Of course. This section of mountain road was notorious for dead zones, one of the reasons she rarely took this route. But tonight's detour to avoid construction had led her straight into disaster. Maya began walking, each step a monumental effort as the snow deepened around her feet. The storm was worsening, transforming the familiar landscape into an alien wasteland of white. She couldn't see more than a few feet in any direction, couldn't tell if she was walking toward civilization or deeper into the wilderness. Her body was shutting down. She could feel it in the way her thoughts became sluggish, how her limbs felt disconnected from her will. Hypothermia was setting in, and her shifter healing could only do so much when she couldn't access her wolf form. The cruel irony that she might die alone on a mountain road, just miles from where she'd been born, wasn't lost on her. Maybe this is how it ends, she thought as she stumbled again, her knees hitting the frozen ground. Maybe this is what they always said I deserved. The snow was beautiful, she realized. Peaceful. Each flake caught what little light remained, creating a world of crystal and silence. As her vision blurred and darkness crept in from the edges, Maya Frost closed her eyes and let the storm claim her. She never heard the sound of an approaching engine cutting through the night. Chapter 2. Steel and Snow. Adrian Blackthorne had learned to trust his instincts long before he became an alpha. Tonight, something pulled at him through the storm, an urgency he couldn't explain. He had been returning from Seattle, another grueling negotiation with human investors who had no idea they were funding a supernatural empire. His Bentley cut through the snow with precision, but even luxury couldn't make this drive pleasant. At 28, Adrian commanded respect from both worlds. The human corporate sphere where he'd built a billion-dollar technology empire, and the supernatural realm where he ruled the Midnight Ridge Pack with calculated authority. The dual existence exhausted him sometimes, but it was the price of protecting over 200 pack members who depended on his leadership. The storm had worsened in the past hour, transforming the mountain roads into skating rinks. He should have stayed in Seattle another night. But something had driven him home with unusual urgency. His wolf paced restlessly beneath his skin, sensing danger or opportunity. He couldn't tell which. That's when he saw the wreckage. The Honda sat crumpled against a massive pine, steam rising from its destroyed engine like a ghostly prayer. Adrian pulled over immediately, his enhanced senses already cataloging details. Recent crash, single occupant, blood scent mixing with something else. Something that made his wolf sit up and take notice. He found her 20 yards from the vehicle, collapsed in the deepening snow like a broken angel. Dark hair spilled across white powder, and blood had frozen in crimson streaks down her pale face. She wore hospital scrubs under a thin jacket, completely inadequate for this weather. Human, he assumed, until he caught her scent properly. Shifter, but unlike any he'd encountered before. Adrian knelt beside her, checking for a pulse. Weak but steady. Her skin was ice cold, lips tinged blue with hypothermia. He had minutes, maybe less, before her body shut down completely. Without hesitation, he lifted her into his arms, surprised by how fragile she felt, despite the strength he sensed, sleeping beneath her surface. The Bentley's heated interior provided immediate relief, as Adrian settled her in the passenger seat, cranking the temperature to maximum. He grabbed an emergency blanket from the trunk, wrapping it around her small frame while keeping one eye on the road. His estate was 15 minutes away if he pushed the speed limit. She didn't have 15 minutes. "Come on," he murmured, pressing his foot harder on the accelerator. "Stay with me." Her eyelids fluttered halfway through the drive, confusion clouding dark brown eyes as consciousness returned in fragments. She tried to speak, but managed only a weak sound that might have been protest. Adrian felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness, his wolf responding to her distress with unusual intensity. "You're safe," he said, surprised by the gentleness in his own voice. "I found you on the mountain road. You've been in an accident." She struggled to focus on his face, her brows drawing together as she processed his words. When recognition failed to dawn, he realized she didn't know who he was. Most shifters in the region recognized Adrian Blackthorne on sight, but this woman looked at him like any stranger who'd offered help. The Blackthorne estate rose from the mountainside like something from a Gothic novel, all stone and sharp angles softened only by the falling snow. Adrian pulled into the circular drive, already mentally cataloging what she would need: medical attention, warm clothes, food, answers to questions she hadn't asked yet. Carrying her again, he noticed how she fit perfectly against his chest, how her scent, wild honey mixed with something distinctly untamed, seemed to wrap around his senses. His staff would be asleep at this hour, but Dr. Reynolds lived on the property specifically for emergencies like this one. The main foyer impressed most visitors with its soaring ceilings and crystal chandelier, but the woman in his arms remained unconscious as he carried her to one of the guest suites. The room was decorated in warm earth tones, with a fireplace he quickly lit, and windows that would offer spectacular mountain views once the storm passed. Dr. Reynolds arrived within minutes, a compact woman in her 50s who'd been treating pack members for over a decade. She examined the injured woman with professional efficiency, while Adrian paced by the windows, unable to explain his agitation. Mild concussion, moderate hypothermia, some bruising, Dr. Reynolds reported. She'll be fine with rest and warmth, though I must say, her healing rate seems accelerated for a human. Adrian said nothing about the woman's true nature. Dr. Reynolds was human herself, one of the few outsiders trusted with pack secrets, but some instinct warned him to keep this particular discovery private. After the doctor left, Adrian found himself unable to leave the suite. He settled into the armchair beside the bed, ostensibly to monitor her condition, but truthfully because something about her presence calmed his restless wolf. She slept deeply, her breathing gradually returning to normal as warmth seeped back into her system. Dawn was breaking beyond the windows when she finally stirred, consciousness returning with sudden awareness that spoke of hard-learned survival instincts. Her eyes snapped open, immediately scanning the unfamiliar room before settling on Adrian with unmistakable wariness. "Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse but steady, and Adrian caught the slight accent that marked her as local-born. "My home," he replied simply. "I found you unconscious in the snow after your accident. You were dying of hypothermia." She struggled to sit up, wincing as movement aggravated her injuries. "I need to go. Thank you for helping me. But I can't stay here." "You can barely sit up," Adrian observed, making no move to help her. Something told him this woman would reject assistance until she decided to accept it. "The storm hasn't passed, the roads are impassable, and you have a concussion." "I don't care." She swung her legs over the side of the bed, immediately paling as dizziness overtook her. "I can't be here. You don't understand." Adrian rose from his chair, using his full height to his advantage. "Then explain it to me." For a moment, their eyes locked across the elegant room. Adrian felt something shift in the air between them, recognition of a different sort. She was beautiful, he realized with surprise. Not in the polished way of the women who typically sought his attention, but with the raw authenticity of someone who'd been tested by life and emerged unbroken. "I don't owe you explanations," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "No," Adrian agreed, "but you owe me the courtesy of not dying in my guest room after I went to the trouble of saving your life." Despite everything, her lips twitched with what might have been amusement. "Is that your idea of bedside manner?" "I'm not known for my bedside manner," Adrian admitted. "I'm known for getting results." She studied him with intelligent eyes, and Adrian had the distinct impression she was seeing more than he typically revealed. "What's your name?" "Adrian Blackthorne." He watched for recognition that didn't come. "And you are?" A long pause. "Maya." "Maya what?" "Just Maya." Her tone suggested the conversation was over. Adrian felt his wolf stir with interest at her defiance. Most people, supernatural or human, deferred to his authority instinctively. This woman looked at him like he was just another obstacle to navigate. "Well, just Maya," he said, moving to the windows. "The storm is expected to last another day, possibly 2. You're welcome to stay until it passes, or you can venture out into 10 feet of snow with a head injury. Your choice." She was quiet for so long he turned back to look at her. Maya sat on the edge of the bed, her dark hair falling like a curtain around her face as she stared at her hands. When she finally looked up, Adrian saw something in her eyes that made his chest tighten unexpectedly. "Why did you stop?" she asked quietly. "People drive past accidents all the time, especially in weather like this." Adrian considered lying, offering some platitude about good citizenship. Instead, he found himself telling the truth. "I don't know. Something told me to." Maya nodded slowly, as if his answer confirmed something she'd suspected. "I'll stay until the storm passes. But then I leave." "Understood." As Adrian left her to rest, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything had just changed. His wolf was more settled than it had been in months, and the estate felt different with her presence in it. He told himself it was simple attraction, the natural response of an unmated alpha to an interesting female. But deep down, Adrian Blackthorne knew he was lying to himself. Chapter 3. Wild Recognition. Maya woke to the sound of howling wind and the crackle of flames in the fireplace. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The silk sheets were softer than anything she'd owned, and the room smelled of cedar and something distinctly masculine that made her wolf stir restlessly. Then memory crashed back. The accident, the storm, Adrian Blackthorne's penetrating gaze. She'd slept for nearly 12 hours, her body finally succumbing to exhaustion after months of running on empty. Outside the tall windows, snow continued to fall in thick curtains, transforming the world into an endless expanse of white. Maya had seen storms before, but nothing like this. The weather seemed almost supernatural in its intensity. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Maya, I've brought you some clothes." Adrian's voice carried through the heavy door, and Maya felt that strange flutter in her chest again. She wrapped the blanket around herself before opening the door, finding him holding a stack of women's clothing with an expression that might have been embarrassment on anyone else. "My housekeeper keeps spare clothes for guests," he explained, not quite meeting her eyes. "They should fit well enough." Maya accepted the bundle, acutely aware of how close he stood. Up close, she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could smell the scent that had haunted her dreams. Pine forests and thunderstorms with something uniquely him underneath. Her wolf responded with interest that she quickly suppressed. "Thank you," she managed, stepping back before she did something foolish. "Breakfast is ready when you are. The dining room is down the hall to the left." After he left, Maya examined the clothes with growing unease. The sweater was cashmere, the jeans designer denim that probably cost more than she made in a week. Everything fit perfectly, which raised questions she wasn't ready to consider. How had he known her size? How prepared was Adrian Blackthorne for unexpected female guests? The dining room continued the estate's theme of understated luxury. A mahogany table that could seat 12, windows offering panoramic views of the storm-lashed mountains. Adrian sat at one end, reading something on his tablet while coffee steamed in a mug beside him. He looked up when she entered, and Maya caught something in his expression that vanished too quickly to identify. "How are you feeling?" he asked, gesturing to the chair beside him rather than the far end of the table. "Better." Maya sat carefully, still fighting occasional dizziness. The clothes fit perfectly. "Lucky guess." Something like that. Adrian poured coffee from an expensive-looking pot, adding cream without asking how she liked it. The fact that he'd guessed correctly sent another warning bell through Maya's already alert system. They ate in companionable silence. Eggs Benedict that tasted better than anything she'd had in years, fresh fruit that must have cost a fortune in this weather. Maya tried not to think about what this meal represented in terms of her monthly budget. Tried not to feel guilty for enjoying luxury she couldn't afford. "Tell me about yourself," Adrian said eventually, his tone carefully casual. Maya's guard went up immediately. "Not much to tell. I work at the hospital, keep to myself, mind my own business." "3 jobs," Adrian observed, and Maya's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Hospital scrubs, but you smell like veterinary antiseptic and diner grease. That's a lot of work for someone so young. How do you—" Maya caught herself before finishing the question. Of course he could smell those things. The question was why he was admitting to enhanced senses. "You're very observant. It's a survival skill in my line of work." Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying her with uncomfortable intensity. Though I'm curious why someone with your talents is working 3 minimum wage jobs. The air between them shifted, becoming charged with unspoken understanding. Maya set down her fork, her appetite vanishing as familiar fear crept up her spine. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? Adrian's voice remained gentle, but Maya caught the steel underneath. You're shifter-born, Maya. Your scent gives you away, even if everything else about you screams human. Maya's flight instinct kicked in with painful intensity. She pushed back from the table, already calculating distances to exits. But Adrian remained perfectly still in his chair. No threatening postures, no commands. Just patient waiting that somehow felt more dangerous than aggression would have. I should go, she said, hating how her voice shook slightly. Storm or no storm, I need to leave. Where will you go? The question was asked with genuine curiosity rather than challenge. Your car is totaled. The roads won't be passable for days, and you have nowhere else to be, or you wouldn't have been driving alone in this weather. The accuracy of his assessment stung, because it was completely true. Maya had no pack, no family, no safety net beyond her own determination to survive. She was exactly as alone as he'd described, and they both knew it. Before she could respond, a commotion arose from somewhere deeper in the house. Raised voices, the sound of multiple footsteps, then a sharp bark that made Maya's head snap up with sudden alertness. That wasn't a dog. It was something wild, something in pain. Adrian was already moving, his earlier casualness replaced by focused authority. Stay here, he commanded, but Maya was already following him toward the source of the disturbance. They found the scene in the estate's mudroom. 3 men in work clothes clustered around something on the floor, while a woman Maya didn't recognize knelt beside what looked like an injured animal. As they got closer, Maya's enhanced senses cataloged the details. 5 wolves, all wild rather than shifter, all showing signs of exposure and injury. Found them huddled against the generator shed. One of the men was explaining to Adrian. Storm must have driven them down from higher elevations. 2 are pretty bad off, and they're all half frozen. Maya stepped forward without thinking, her earlier fear forgotten in the face of suffering. The lead wolf, a magnificent silver-gray female, lifted her head as Maya approached, yellow eyes meeting brown in a moment of perfect communication. The animal's hackles relaxed, and she settled back down with something that sounded almost like relief. Careful, the woman kneeling beside the wolves warned. They're scared But Maya was already moving, her hands hovering over the injured animals with instinctive knowledge. She could feel their pain like a physical ache in her own chest, could sense the fear and confusion that came with being driven from familiar territory by the supernatural storm. Hey, beautiful, she murmured to the silver female, her voice taking on a quality she'd never heard before. You're safe now. I promise you're safe. The wolf's response was immediate and startling. She lifted her head again, making a soft whining sound that seemed to resonate through the entire pack. One by one, the other wolves turned toward Maya with expressions of recognition that defied explanation. Maya knelt among them, her hands moving with sure confidence as she examined injuries and offered comfort. The wolves not only allowed her touch, they sought it out, pressing against her palms and following her movements with an attention that bordered on worship. I'll be damned, one of the men breathed. Maya glanced up to find everyone in the room staring at her with expressions ranging from amazement to something approaching awe. Adrian's face was unreadable, but his scent had changed in a way that made her wolf pace restlessly. They need warming blankets and fresh water, she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. The silver one has a dislocated shoulder. I can set it, but someone needs to hold her steady. And the black male has infected cuts on his pads that need cleaning. How do you know all that? The woman asked. Maya realized she didn't have a good answer. She just knew, the same way she'd always known things about injured animals that others missed. I work at a veterinary clinic sometimes. But as she returned her attention to the wolves, Maya caught Adrian watching her with an expression she couldn't read. His earlier casual interest had transformed into something more intense, more calculating. She had revealed too much, shown abilities that marked her as different, in ways that had always brought her trouble. The silver wolf nudged her hand, drawing Maya's focus back to the immediate need. As she worked to help the injured animals, she tried to ignore the weight of Adrian's gaze and the growing certainty that her carefully constructed anonymity had just shattered completely. When the last wolf was settled comfortably by the mudroom's fireplace, Maya straightened to find Adrian still watching her. The room had emptied except for them and the pack of rescued animals, who seemed content to rest in her presence. "That was remarkable," Adrian said quietly. Maya shrugged, avoiding his eyes. "Animals in pain recognize others who understand. Is that what you think this was?" His voice carried a note she couldn't identify. Understanding? Before Maya could answer, the silver wolf lifted her head and howled, a sound of pure communication that seemed to echo through the estate's stone walls. Within moments, the other wolves had joined in, creating a harmony that resonated in Maya's bones like a call to home. As their voices faded, Maya realized the storm outside had gentled to a whisper. But the real storm, the one building between her and Adrian Blackthorne, was just beginning. Chapter 4. Dangerous Territory. The next morning brought crystalline sunshine and the kind of profound silence that only follows a major storm. Maya woke to find the rescued wolves still sleeping peacefully in the mudroom, their presence having transformed the practical space into something resembling a wild sanctuary. She'd checked on them twice during the night, unable to resist the pull she felt toward their vulnerable forms. Adrian found her there at dawn, sitting cross-legged among the pack with a cup of coffee growing cold in her hands. The silver female had positioned herself as close as possible without actually touching, while the others formed a protective semicircle around Maya's seated figure. "They trust you completely," Adrian observed, settling onto a nearby bench with his own steaming mug. "Animals sense things we can't," Maya replied without looking up. "They know when someone won't hurt them." Something in her tone made Adrian study her more carefully. The defiance from yesterday had softened into something more complex, acceptance mixed with an ancient sadness that seemed too deep for someone so young. He found himself wanting to understand what had put that look in her eyes. "The storm's passed," he said eventually. "Roads should be clear by afternoon." Maya nodded, her fingers unconsciously stroking the silver wolf's fur. "Then I'll leave today. Thank you for everything you've done." "Where will you go?" Adrian asked the same question as before, but this time it carried different weight. He'd spent half the night researching Maya Frost. What little public record existed painted a picture of someone living deliberately under the radar. "I'll figure something out. I always do." Adrian set down his coffee and leaned forward slightly. "What if I offered you an alternative?" Maya's hand stilled on the wolf's fur, but she didn't look up. "What kind of alternative?" "The pack has a veterinary clinic that serves the community. We've been looking for someone with your skills." Adrian chose his words carefully, aware that one wrong move would send her running. It would come with housing, benefits, a salary that would let you quit those other jobs. "I don't have veterinary training beyond basic first aid," Maya said. But Adrian caught the note of longing in her voice. "Dr. Chen, who runs the clinic, says training can be provided for the right person. Someone with natural instincts." Adrian paused meaningfully. "Someone animals trust instinctively." Maya finally looked at him, and Adrian felt that same electric awareness that had been building since he'd found her in the snow. She was beautiful in the morning light, her dark hair catching golden highlights, and her brown eyes reflecting depths he was only beginning to explore. "Why?" she asked simply. "Because you're wasted working 3 dead-end jobs when you could be doing something that matters." Adrian found himself being more honest than he'd intended. "Because watching you with those wolves yesterday was like watching someone come alive." Heat flickered between them, a tension that had nothing to do with job offers and everything to do with the way Maya's scent seemed to wrap around his senses. Adrian had dated plenty of women, sophisticated humans who understood his wealth, powerful shifters who appreciated his status. None of them had ever made his wolf pace restlessly just from proximity. "I can't," Maya said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You don't understand the situation. Then explain it to me." Adrian moved closer, close enough to catch the wild honey scent that seemed to intensify when she was emotional. "What are you running from?" Maya stood abruptly, disturbing the wolves' peaceful arrangement. The silver female whined softly in protest, but remained where she was. "It's complicated." Most things worth understanding are complicated. She paced to the windows, wrapping her arms around herself as she stared out at the snow-covered landscape. Adrian remained seated, recognizing the body language of someone preparing to flee. His wolf wanted to pursue, to corner her until she had no choice but to accept his protection. But his human mind understood that approach would only drive her away faster. "I was exiled from my birth pack," Maya said finally, the words coming out like pulled teeth. 4 years ago. They considered me dangerous. Dangerous how? Maya laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Would you believe cursed? Born during an eclipse? Supposedly destined to bring disaster to anyone foolish enough to keep me around?" Adrian felt something cold settle in his chest. He knew enough about pack politics to understand what exile meant. Complete abandonment, loss of protection, rejection by one's own kind. It explained her wariness, her determination to remain anonymous, the careful way she held herself apart from others. "What pack?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew. "Silver Creek." Maya's voice was barely above a whisper. "Alpha Garrett decided I was too much of a risk after my mother died. Accidents tend to happen around me, you see. People get hurt." Adrian's jaw clenched involuntarily. Garrett Morrison was old-school territory, the kind of alpha who ruled through fear and superstition. If he'd exiled Maya over eclipse birth nonsense, it said more about his insecurities than any real danger she might represent. "That's archaic bullshit," Adrian said with quiet fury that made Maya turn from the window in surprise. "Eclipse births are rare, not cursed. The old stories got twisted over time. Tell that to the pack members who started avoiding me after my 15th birthday. Maya replied bitterly. "Tell that to my mother, who died defending someone everyone considered a walking disaster." The pain in her voice made Adrian's protective instincts flare dangerously. He rose from the bench, closing the distance between them before Maya could retreat. "You're not a disaster. What I saw yesterday with the wolves wasn't dangerous. It was a gift. Gifts can be dangerous," Maya said. But she didn't step away when Adrian moved closer. "You don't know what I'm capable of. Show me." The words left Adrian's mouth before he could stop them, charged with challenge and something deeper. "Show me what makes you so dangerous." Maya's eyes widened at the direct dare. For a moment, Adrian thought she would bolt after all. Then something shifted in her expression. Defiance replacing fear. Strength overriding vulnerability. She stepped closer, close enough that Adrian could feel the heat radiating from her skin. "You want to see dangerous?" Maya's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "You want to know why Alpha Garrett was so eager to be rid of me?" Before Adrian could respond, Maya placed her palm flat against his chest. The contact sent electricity shooting through every nerve ending, but it was nothing compared to what happened next. Adrian's wolf, always controlled and disciplined, suddenly surged forward with desperate hunger. Not for dominance or territory, but for the woman standing so close he could count her eyelashes. Maya's scent intensified, wild honey mixed with something that called to every primal instinct Adrian possessed. Around them, the rescued wolves stirred restlessly, sensing the shift in energy. The silver female lifted her head and made a sound that was part whine, part recognition. "This," Maya breathed, her hand still pressed against Adrian's chest. "This is what happens. People can't think clearly around me, can't make rational decisions. Animals become obsessed, territorial. Pack dynamics fall apart because everyone's either protecting me or trying to drive me away." Adrian's rational mind tried to process her words, but his wolf was completely focused on the woman in front of him. He wanted to pull her closer, to bury his face in her neck and breathe in that intoxicating scent until it replaced the air in his lungs. The intensity of his reaction should have been alarming. He was known for his control, his ability to think strategically even in emotional situations. "Adrian," Maya's voice cut through the haze of want clouding his thoughts. "Do you see now? This is why I have to leave. This is why I can't stay here or work for you or pretend I'm anything other than what I am." With enormous effort, Adrian stepped back, breaking the physical contact that was wreaking havoc on his system. The loss of her touch left him feeling strangely bereft, as if something essential had been taken away. "That wasn't..." Ordinary attraction, he managed, his voice rougher than usual. No, Maya agreed, her own breathing slightly uneven. It wasn't. And it gets stronger over time, more dangerous. People start making choices they wouldn't normally make, taking risks they shouldn't take. Eventually, someone gets hurt. Adrian's mind raced as he processed the implications. He'd heard whispers of such things in the old stories, shifters whose very presence could influence others, whose scent could drive wolves to distraction. He'd always assumed they were myths, cautionary tales told to explain away poor decisions. Is that what happened to your mother? He asked gently. Maya's face crumpled slightly before she regained control. She defended me against pack members who wanted me gone. Got between me and their anger one too many times. The morning they found her at the bottom of Raven's Gorge. She'd been arguing with 3 pack males about my right to remain. That wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? Maya moved back to the window, putting distance between them again. She would never have been in that position if not for me. None of it would have happened if I'd just accepted exile quietly. Adrian wanted to argue, to tell her that her mother's death was the result of pack prejudice and male stupidity, not her natural abilities. But he could see Maya had carried this guilt for 4 years, had built her entire existence around the belief that she was dangerous to anyone who got too close. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted his thoughts. Doctor. Chen appeared in the doorway, her usually composed expression showing signs of excitement. I hate to interrupt, she said, glancing between Adrian and Maya with professional curiosity, but I wanted to check on our patients before heading to the clinic. Maya immediately shifted into helpful mode, kneeling among the wolves and providing updates on their condition, with the kind of detailed observation that impressed even Dr. Chen. Adrian watched her work, noting how the animals responded to her presence with complete trust. When Dr. Chen left with promises to return later, Maya began gathering the few belongings Adrian's staff had salvaged from her wrecked car. The message was clear. She was preparing to leave as soon as transportation could be arranged. Maya, Adrian's voice stopped her mid-motion. Stay. She looked up, and Adrian saw longing war with fear in her dark eyes. You felt what just happened between us. You know why I can't. I know that I've never met anyone like you. Adrian replied honestly. I know that watching you with those wolves was the most natural thing I've ever seen. And I know that running away from what you are isn't living. It's just surviving. For a moment, Maya seemed to waver. Then she shook her head, returning to her packing. Surviving is enough. It has to be. As Adrian watched her prepare to leave his life as suddenly as she'd entered it, he realized that for the first time in his adult life, surviving wasn't going to be enough for him either. Chapter 5. Shattered Trust. 3 weeks had passed since Maya agreed to stay at the Blackthorn estate, and despite her fears, nothing catastrophic had happened. She'd thrown herself into working with Dr. Chen at the pack's veterinary clinic, learning faster than anyone had expected. Her natural abilities with injured animals made her invaluable. And for the first time in years, Maya felt like she belonged somewhere. The rescued wolves had recovered and returned to the wild, but not before establishing a pattern that continued to mystify everyone except Maya. Wild animals sought out the clinic with increasing frequency. Injured deer, sick foxes, even a massive black bear with an infected paw who'd somehow known exactly where to find help. Adrian had been patient, giving her space while making his interest clear through small gestures. Coffee appeared at her workstation without request. Her favorite books materialized in her temporary quarters. He found excuses to visit the clinic, always professional but with an undercurrent of awareness that made Maya's pulse quicken despite her better judgment. She was beginning to hope, beginning to believe that maybe her curse could coexist with happiness. That had been her first mistake. Maya was cataloging medical supplies when she heard familiar voices in Adrian's study. The estate's thick walls usually muffled conversations, but today the door was partially open, and her enhanced hearing caught every word with crystal clarity. I've completed the background check you requested, came the voice of Marcus, Adrian's head of security. Maya Frost, born Elena Maya Frost, Silver Creek Pack Territory. Exiled 4 years ago under Alpha Garrett Morrison's authority. Maya's blood turned to ice. Adrian had investigated her. While she'd been stupidly falling for his kindness, he'd been treating her like a security threat. What else? Adrian's voice was neutral, businesslike, the same tone he used during corporate negotiations. Parents were Elena Frost, deceased, and father unknown. The mother died under suspicious circumstances shortly before the exile, found at the bottom of Ravine Gorge after defending her daughter against pack justice. There were rumors of unnatural influence, animals behaving aggressively toward anyone who threatened the girl. Maya pressed her back against the hallway wall, her heart hammering so hard she was sure they would hear it. Adrian had known everything: her exile, her mother's death, the circumstances that had driven her from her birth pack, every moment of vulnerability she'd shared, every tentative step toward trust. It had all been a lie. Most interesting is what I found about eclipse births, Marcus continued. There's an old prophecy that's been circulating among the traditionalist packs. Something about beast whisperers returning during times of great change. Beast whisperers? Adrian's voice sharpened with interest that cut through Maya like a blade. Ancient bloodline, supposedly extinct for over a century. They could communicate with and command wild animals, served as bridges between the supernatural and natural worlds. The prophecies say they'll return when the old ways are threatened, marked by birth during lunar eclipse. Maya had heard enough. She slipped away from the door, her mind reeling with betrayal so complete it left her breathless. Adrian hadn't saved her out of kindness. He'd been studying her, investigating her background, while she'd been foolish enough to believe in his sincerity. She made it to her room and began packing with mechanical precision. Her few belongings fit easily into the bag she'd arrived with, a reminder of how little she truly owned, how easily she could disappear from places that had never really been home. A soft knock interrupted her packing. "Maya? Are you in there?" Adrian's voice through the door made her hands shake with fury and hurt. She took a deep breath, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Come in." He entered with that same easy confidence she'd come to associate with safety, his dark eyes immediately noting her packed bag and defensive posture. "Going somewhere?" "Leaving," Maya said simply. "Thank you for your hospitality, but it's time I moved on." Just like that, Adrian moved closer, and Maya caught the subtle shift in his scent that indicated confusion mixed with something sharper. What changed? Maya almost laughed at the question. Nothing changed. That's the problem. I don't understand. Don't you? Maya turned to face him fully, letting him see the pain and anger she'd been hiding. "Tell me, Adrian, when exactly did you have Marcus investigate my background? Before or after you found me bleeding in the snow?" Adrian went very still, the kind of predatory stillness that reminded Maya exactly what he was beneath the expensive suits and careful charm. "Maya, before or after?" Her voice cracked slightly on the repetition. "Before or after you made me believe that maybe, just maybe, someone could see me as more than a problem to be solved?" "After," Adrian said quietly. "I investigated after you showed your abilities with the wolves. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. What you were dealing with," Maya repeated, tasting the bitterness of those words. "Not who, what. Because that's all I am to you, isn't it? A curiosity. A potential asset. A beast whisperer bloodline to be cataloged and contained." Adrian's jaw tightened. "It's not like that, isn't it?" Maya grabbed her bag, pushing past him toward the door. "You knew everything about my exile, about my mother's death, about the prophecies and bloodlines. You let me tell you pieces of my story like I was sharing something precious, when you already knew the whole ugly truth. I wanted to hear it from you," Adrian said, following her into the hallway. "I wanted you to trust me enough to tell me yourself." Maya whirled around, her control finally snapping. "Trust? You want to talk about trust? I told you things I've never told another living soul, and the entire time you were treating me like a specimen in a lab." "That's not," Adrian began, but Maya cut him off. "Did you think I was stupid?" Tears of rage and humiliation burned in her eyes. "Did you think I wouldn't figure out that your sudden interest in hiring me was really about studying the freak with the animal powers?" "Maya, please." "No!" The word exploded from her with such force that Adrian actually stepped back. "I won't be your research project. I won't be your convenient beast whisperer to trot out when you need wild animals managed. I've been used before by people who claim to care about me. and I won't let it happen again." Adrian's expression darkened, his alpha authority finally showing through the careful facade. "You're being ridiculous. Everything I've done has been to protect you, to give you a place where you could be safe. Protect me?" Maya laughed bitterly. "Or protect your pack from me? Which is it, Adrian? Are you the savior or the warden?" The question hung between them like a blade, cutting through weeks of careful relationship building with surgical precision. Adrian's silence stretched too long, and Maya saw the truth in his hesitation. "Both," she whispered, the fight draining out of her as quickly as it had come. "You're both. You wanted to help me, but you also needed to make sure I wasn't a threat. You cared about me, but not enough to be honest. Not enough to see me as an equal rather than a problem to be managed." "Maya, don't." She held up a hand to stop him. "Please don't make this harder than it already is. We both know this was temporary. I should have left after the storm passed like I planned." Adrian moved to block her path to the stairs. "Where will you go? You have nothing. No money, no transportation, nowhere safe. I survived 4 years before I met you," Maya said with quiet dignity. "I'll survive whatever comes next." "The other packs know about you now," Adrian pressed. "Word travels fast in our world. Alpha Garrett has been making inquiries about your whereabouts. You can't just disappear again." Fear flickered through Maya's chest, but she refused to let it show. Alpha Garrett's interest could only mean one thing. He'd decided she posed enough of a threat to be worth hunting, but the alternative was staying with someone who saw her as a useful tool, rather than a person worth loving. "Then I'll deal with that when it happens," she said. "I won't trade one cage for another, no matter how gilded yours might be." Adrian's scent spiked with frustration, and something that might have been desperation. "This isn't a cage. This is a home. A place where you can be yourself without fear. A home where the owner investigates the guests behind their backs?" Maya shook her head sadly. "A place where I'm valued for my usefulness rather than my worth as a person? That's not a home, Adrian. That's employment with benefits." She pushed past him, and this time he let her go. At the top of the stairs, Maya turned back one last time, memorizing his face, despite the pain it caused. "For what it's worth," she said softly, "I was falling in love with you. The you I thought you were anyway. The man who saved a stranger in a storm without expecting anything in return. I'm sorry that man was just another beautiful lie." Adrian's face went pale, his mouth opening as if to speak. But Maya was already walking away. She made it to the front door before her composure cracked completely, tears finally spilling over as she stepped into the cold mountain air. Behind her, she heard Adrian call her name, but she didn't turn around. Some mistakes couldn't be undone with words, and some trust, once broken, could never be fully repaired. As Maya walked down the long driveway toward an uncertain future, she tried to convince herself that leaving was the right choice, that protecting her heart was worth the loneliness that stretched ahead like an endless winter road. But with each step that took her further from the estate, the hollow ache in her chest grew stronger, until Maya began to wonder if some kinds of pain were worse than the risks of staying. The sound of a car engine behind her made Maya's steps falter, hope and dread warring in her chest. But when she turned, it wasn't Adrian coming after her. The black SUV with Silver Creek pack markings sent ice through her veins, and Maya realized that her past had finally caught up with her. Her last thought before the tranquilizer dart hit her neck was that she should have trusted Adrian's warning about the other packs, should have trusted him about a lot of things. The darkness that claimed her tasted like regret and missed chances, like love that might have been if she'd been brave enough to stay and fight for it. Chapter 6. Awakening. Maya's consciousness returned in fragments, the taste of copper in her mouth, the burn of rope against her wrists, the familiar scent of pine and damp earth that meant she was back in Silver Creek territory. Her head throbbed where the tranquilizer had hit, but beneath the physical pain, something else stirred, something that had been sleeping for far too long. She kept her breathing steady, and her eyes closed, using her enhanced senses to map her surroundings. Underground space. Probably the old root cellar beneath the pack house. 3 heartbeats nearby, 2 calm and controlled, 1 agitated and fearful. The agitated one was young, barely past first shift by the scent of him. "She's been out for 6 hours," the young voice whispered. "Maybe we used too much of the trank." "She's stronger than she looks," came the gravelly response of Beta Thomas Kane, Alpha Garrett's right hand for over 2 decades. "Eclipse-born always are." A third voice, cold and calculating. "Good. I want her fully aware for what comes next." Alpha Garrett Morrison. Maya's blood chilled at the sound of the voice that had haunted her nightmares for 4 years. The man who had exiled her, who had allowed the pack to believe she was responsible for her mother's death. The man who feared her enough to hunt her down, rather than let her live in peace. "Sir," the young wolf said hesitantly, "the Council of Alphas has been asking questions about our operations. If they find out we crossed into Blackthorn territory to take her, the Council can kiss my ass." Garrett snarled. "This abomination should have been dealt with years ago. I was weak, listened to her mother's pleading, let sentiment cloud my judgment. But the prophecies are clear. Beast whisperers bring chaos. They upset the natural order." Maya heard footsteps approaching her position, felt Garrett's presence like a cold shadow falling across her face. She forced herself to remain limp, to show no signs of consciousness, even as every instinct screamed at her to fight. 4 years she's been out there, growing stronger, learning to use abilities that should have died with the old bloodlines. Garrett continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "And now she's caught the attention of Adrian Blackthorn. Do you know what happens when a beast whisperer bonds with an alpha of his power?" "No, sir," the young wolf replied nervously. "They become unstoppable. 2 minds linked, one controlling supernatural politics, and the other commanding every wild creature within a 100-mile radius. The old stories speak of such pairs bringing down entire kingdoms." Maya's heart clenched despite her situation. Even now, even after learning about his investigation and his clinical interest in her abilities, the mention of Adrian sent pain shooting through her chest. She had loved him. Completely, desperately, foolishly. And he had seen her as exactly what Garrett described. A tool to be used, a power to be harnessed. "So what do we do with her?" Beta Thomas asked. "Same thing we should have done 4 years ago," Garrett replied with chilling finality. "We put her down like the rabid animal she is." The casual discussion of her murder snapped something inside Maya's chest. Not her heart, that had already been shattered by Adrian's betrayal. Something deeper, more primal. The part of her that had been caged and suppressed since her first exile. The wild core that had been whispering at the edges of her consciousness her entire life. Maya's eyes snapped open, and for the first time in her life, they blazed with the golden fire of her true nature fully awakened. "Hello, Garrett," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. "Miss me?" The alpha stumbled backward, his face going pale as he took in the change in her appearance. Maya's ordinary brown eyes now held flecks of molten gold that seemed to pulse with their own light. Her scent had intensified, becoming something wild and untamed that made even Thomas step back instinctively. "Impossible," Garrett breathed. "The tranquilizer should have kept you under for hours more." Maya flexed against her bonds, testing their strength. Heavy rope, professionally tied, designed to hold a shifter. But as her newfound awareness expanded, she realized the ropes weren't her real prison. Fear was. 4 years of hiding, of believing she was dangerous, of accepting others' judgment of her worth. "You know what I've learned in my exile, Garrett?" Maya asked conversationally. "I've learned that the only thing more dangerous than a beast whisperer is a beast whisperer with nothing left to lose." She closed her eyes and reached out with senses she'd never fully understood, calling to the wild hearts that beat in the darkness beyond the cellar walls. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of creatures stirring in the forest above, their primitive minds touching hers with recognition and welcome. "What are you doing?" Thomas demanded, but his voice carried the edge of panic. Maya smiled, and it was not a human expression. "I'm coming home." The first sounds came from the pack house above, scratching at windows, the thud of bodies against doors. Then howls began echoing through the forest, not the organized calls of shifter packs, but the wild harmony of creatures that knew no alpha, but the one calling them. Garrett pulled a silver blade from his belt, the kind designed specifically for killing supernatural beings. Thomas, the ritual circle. Now. But before either man could move, the cellar door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and steel. A massive black bear filled the doorway, its eyes reflecting Maya's golden fire as it fixed its attention on the humans who had dared cage its mistress. Behind the bear came a stream of forest creatures, wolves, coyotes, lynx, even a pair of mountain lions whose presence in this region defied all natural explanation. They flowed into the small space like a living tide, surrounding the 3 Silver Creek pack members with calm, predatory patience. "Sweet Mother Luna," the young wolf whispered, pressing himself against the far wall. Maya felt the ropes binding her wrists simply fall away, dissolved by the touch of a small fox whose intelligence far exceeded its species. She rose to her feet with fluid grace, her movements now carrying the coordinated power of someone who truly understood what she was. "This is what you were so afraid of," she said to Garrett, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had finally stopped apologizing for her existence. Not chaos, not destruction, unity, the kind of power that can't be controlled by fear or tradition, or the small minds of small men. Garrett raised his blade, but a low growl from the black bear froze him in place. The sound echoed through the assembled creatures, a warning that vibrated in frequencies only supernatural senses could detect. "You killed my mother," Maya continued, her golden eyes never leaving Garrett's face. "Oh, you didn't push her yourself, but you created the circumstances that led to her death. You poisoned the pack against her, made her an outcast for defending her child. She chose her side," Garrett snarled, but his voice shook. "She chose the abomination over the pack. She chose love over fear," Maya corrected, "something you've never been capable of understanding." The young wolf, barely 18 by his scent, suddenly stepped forward, his courage surprising everyone in the room. "Alpha," he said quietly, "maybe we should reconsider. She's not doing anything violent. She's just talking." Garrett's face twisted with rage. "Shut up, boy. You don't understand what you're seeing." But Maya saw the truth in the young wolf's eyes. Recognition, not of a monster, but of someone who could choose mercy when she had every right to choose vengeance. The creatures surrounding them remained perfectly still, waiting for her command, but showing no aggression beyond their protective positioning. "What's your name?" Maya asked the young wolf gently. "David," he replied, ignoring Garrett's warning growl. "David Chen." Maya's eyes widened slightly. "Dr. Chen's son." "Yes." David's voice grew stronger. "She told me what you did at the clinic, how you helped animals that no one else could reach. That doesn't sound like someone who brings chaos." The truth of his words seemed to resonate through the assembled creatures, who shifted closer to Maya with something that looked almost like pride. She was their voice, their protector, their bridge between worlds that had been separated for too long. "You see, Garrett," Maya said softly, "the next generation isn't afraid of change. They understand that different doesn't mean dangerous." Garrett's grip tightened on his blade. "I won't let you corrupt our young with your unnatural influence. The only thing unnatural here is your hatred," Maya replied. "But I'm not here for revenge, no matter how much you might deserve it." She gestured to the creatures surrounding them, and they began filing back toward the destroyed doorway with the same eerie coordination they'd shown entering. Only the black bear remained, its massive form blocking any potential escape route. "I'm here for something much more valuable than vengeance," Maya continued. "I'm here for the truth. And the truth is that beast whisperers were never the problem. We were the solution, bridges between the supernatural and natural worlds, healers of the rifts that fear creates." As the last of the wild creatures disappeared into the forest above, Maya felt a familiar presence at the edge of her expanded awareness. Her heart clenched as Adrian's scent reached her, carrying notes of desperation and determination that spoke of a frantic search finally ended. "Maya!" His voice echoed through the damaged pack house above, followed by the sounds of multiple shifters spreading out in search formation. "It seems your time is up," Maya said to Garrett, but her attention was divided now. Adrian had come for her. Despite everything that had broken between them, He had tracked her to enemy territory and brought what sounded like half his pack as backup. The question was, had he come to rescue her or to reclaim a valuable asset? "This isn't over," Garrett snarled, but his threat rang hollow with Adrian's pack so close. Maya looked at him with something that might have been pity. "Yes, it is. The old ways are dying, Garrett. The question is whether you'll adapt or be left behind." As Adrian's footsteps thundered down the cellar stairs, Maya took a deep breath and prepared to face the man who had broken her heart. The woman who had fled the estate in tears was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood her own worth. Whether that would be enough to bridge the chasm between them remained to be seen. Chapter 7. Soul-deep Adrian's heart stopped when he saw Maya standing in the ruined cellar, surrounded by the remnants of what looked like a supernatural army. Her eyes blazed with golden fire he'd never seen before, and her scent had transformed into something wild and untamed that made his wolf howl with recognition. She was magnificent and terrifying, and absolutely, undeniably his. Maya. Her name left his lips like a prayer, relief flooding through him so completely that his knees nearly buckled. "Thank God you're alive." Behind him, Marcus and 6 other pack members fanned out, their weapons trained on Garrett and his men. The Silver Creek Alpha looked smaller than Adrian remembered, diminished by fear and the weight of his own cruelty. Beta Thomas kept his hands visible and his posture submissive, clearly recognizing the shift in power dynamics. Adrian. Maya's voice carried new harmonics that resonated in his bones. "You came. Did you think I wouldn't?" He stepped closer, ignoring the warning growls from Garrett's faction. "When I found your note. When I realized what had happened." "What note?" Maya's golden eyes narrowed with confusion. Adrian's blood chilled as he processed her response. "The note you left, explaining why you had to go, telling me not to follow." But even as he said the words, he knew the truth. There had been no note. Maya had been taken, not run away. "I didn't leave a note," Maya said quietly. "I was abducted from your driveway by Silver Creek enforcers." The rage that exploded through Adrian was primal and absolute. His wolf surged forward, demanding immediate violence against anyone who had dared touch their mate. He turned toward Garrett with murder in his eyes, but Maya's voice stopped him cold. "Adrian, don't." The command in her tone was unmistakable, backed by power he was only beginning to understand. "This isn't the way. They took you from my territory," Adrian snarled, his alpha authority making the air itself vibrate with threat. "They drugged you, imprisoned you, planned to murder you. There are laws. Laws that you broke when you investigated me behind my back," Maya interrupted, and the words hit Adrian like physical blows. "Laws that you ignored when you decided I was a problem to be managed rather than a person to be trusted." The truth of her accusation silenced the righteous fury burning in Adrian's chest. Even now, even after everything that had happened, the hurt in her voice cut deeper than any physical wound could have. "Maya," he began, but she held up a hand to stop him. "We'll deal with our issues later," she said with devastating calm. "Right now, we have bigger problems." She turned to face Garrett directly, and Adrian watched in fascination as every creature that had answered her call earlier began returning to the cellar. They moved with supernatural coordination, filling the space until it seemed impossible that so many wild animals could coexist in such proximity without chaos. "You want to know what a real beast whisperer can do?" Maya asked Garrett, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had finally stopped hiding from her own power. "Watch." The animals began to sing. It started with the wolves, a harmony that was nothing like pack communication Adrian had ever heard. This was older, deeper, the kind of music that predated human civilization. The other creatures joined in with their own voices, until the entire cellar resonated with a sound that seemed to come from the earth itself. Adrian felt the song in his bones, in his blood, in the places where his human and wolf selves merged. It spoke of unity, of balance, of the interconnectedness of all living things. This wasn't domination or control. It was communion on a level that transcended species. "This is what you've been so afraid of," Maya said to Garrett over the wild symphony. "Not power over nature, but partnership with it. Not chaos, but harmony you're too small-minded to understand." Young David Chen stepped forward again, his face shining with something approaching wonder. "It's beautiful," he breathed. "Why did we never learn that it could be beautiful?" "Because your alpha chose fear over understanding," Maya replied, but her tone held no malice. "Because it's easier to hate what you don't comprehend than to admit you might be wrong." Garrett's face was pale but determined. "Pretty words won't change what you are. The prophecies speak of beast whisperers as bridges," Maya interrupted. "Healers of the rifts between worlds. You turned them into horror stories because you were afraid of losing control." The wild song gradually faded, leaving behind a silence that felt heavy with possibility. The animals began dispersing again, but Adrian noticed they didn't go far. They were establishing a perimeter, protecting their chosen one even as they granted her space to handle human affairs. "Adrian," Maya said, turning to face him fully for the first time since he'd arrived. "Why did you really come after me?" The question was deceptively simple, but Adrian understood the weight behind it. Everything between them, their future, their past, the fragile hope of healing, balanced on his answer. "Because I love you," he said, the words ripping from somewhere deeper than his throat. "Because I've been a fool, and an ass, and probably a dozen other things you could rightfully call me, but mostly because losing you made me realize that I'd rather have you angry at me than not have you at all." Maya's golden eyes searched his face with uncomfortable intensity. "That's not enough," she said quietly. "Love without trust is just obsession." "You're right." Adrian took a step closer, hyper-aware of the wild creatures watching his every move with protective interest. "I investigated you because I was scared. Not of what you might do to my pack, but of what you were already doing to me." "What do you mean?" Adrian ran a hand through his hair, struggling to find words for feelings he'd never examined too closely. "From the moment I found you in that snow, you changed everything. My priorities, my instincts, my understanding of what I wanted from life. I'd built my entire existence on control, on knowing every variable and managing every risk. Then you showed up and made me want to throw all of that away." Maya's expression softened slightly, but her guard remained firmly in place. "So, you decided to research me like a business acquisition." "I decided to understand what I was dealing with so I could protect both of us from making a mistake," Adrian corrected. "But you're right. I should have been honest. I should have told you what I was doing and why. Should have trusted you with my fears instead of trying to manage them in secret." "Should have. Could have. Would have," Maya said with bitter humor. "The story of our entire relationship." "Then let me tell you what I will do," Adrian said, his voice carrying the full weight of alpha authority. "I will spend every day earning back your trust. I will choose transparency over control, partnership over protection. I will prove that when I say I love you, I mean all of you, not just the parts that are convenient or controllable." The silence stretched between them, loaded with possibilities and perils. Adrian was acutely aware of the audience, his pack, Garrett's people, the supernatural creatures who had claimed Maya as their own. But none of that mattered compared to the woman standing before him with golden fire in her eyes. "Prove it now," Maya said suddenly. "Make a choice, right here, right now, that shows me you mean what you say." Adrian looked around the cellar, his gaze falling on Garrett and his men. Justice demanded retribution for what they'd done: kidnapping, imprisonment, attempted murder. His pack expected him to enforce territorial law, to make an example that would prevent future incursions. But Maya was watching him with those impossibly beautiful eyes, and Adrian realized she was offering him a test he couldn't afford to fail. "Marcus," he said, without taking his eyes off Maya. "Stand down." "Sir?" Marcus's confusion was evident. "They violated our territory, took one of ours." "Stand down," Adrian repeated, his alpha command leaving no room for argument. "All of you, weapons away." Maya's expression didn't change, but Adrian caught the subtle shift in her scent that suggested surprise. He turned to face Garrett directly, letting the older alpha see the full force of his displeasure while keeping his voice level. "You will leave Midnight Ridge territory immediately," Adrian said. "You will never return. You will never again threaten, harass, or interfere with Maya in any way. If you violate any part of this agreement, I will bring the full weight of the Council of Alphas down on your head for territorial violation and attempted murder. You can't just... Garrett began, but Adrian cut him off. I can and I am. Consider it a mercy you don't deserve. Adrian's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. The alternative is letting Maya's new friends handle pack justice in their own way. Somehow I don't think you'd prefer that option. As if summoned by his words, the black bear that had remained in the cellar moved closer to Garrett, its massive form radiating patient menace. The Alpha's face went white as he realized how thoroughly the power dynamics had shifted. This isn't over, Garrett snarled, but the threat carried no real weight. Yes, Maya said with finality. That brooked no argument. It is. As Silver Creek Pack filed out under the watchful eyes of both Midnight Ridge enforcers and Wild Guardians, Adrian found himself alone with Maya for the first time since she'd walked away from his estate. The weight of everything unsaid hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. That was the right choice, Maya said eventually. It was your choice, Adrian replied. I just finally learned how to listen. Maya studied his face for a long moment, and Adrian held himself still under her scrutiny. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft with cautious hope. We have a lot to work through, she said. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. And I'm not the same person who left your estate 3 weeks ago. Neither am I, Adrian assured her. I'm hoping we can figure out who we are together. Maya stepped closer, close enough that Adrian could feel the heat radiating from her skin. Her scent was still wild and untamed, but underneath it, he caught traces of the woman who had captivated him from their first meeting. I love you too, she whispered, and Adrian's heart nearly stopped. Despite everything, despite the hurt and the mistakes and the impossible situation we're in, I love you. Maya. She placed her finger against his lips, silencing him. But loving you isn't enough anymore. I need partnership, equality, honesty. I need to know that when you look at me, you see Maya first and Beast Whisperer second. I see the woman who makes me want to be better than I am, Adrian said against her finger. I see my match, my equal, my mate. The last word hung in the air between them, loaded with supernatural significance that neither of them had dared acknowledge before. Maya's eyes widened at the public declaration, at the claim that would bind them together in ways that transcended human understanding. Is that what you want? She asked quietly. A true mating bond? Not just romance, but the joining of souls that can never be undone? Adrian looked into her golden eyes and saw his future reflected there, wild and untamed and absolutely perfect. More than I've ever wanted anything, he said. If you'll have me. Maya smiled then, the first real smile he'd seen from her since their reunion. It transformed her face completely, replacing the careful control with radiant joy that made Adrian's chest tight with love. Then we do this properly, she said, under the full moon, with both packs as witnesses, according to the old ways that honor what we both are. As they sealed the promise with a kiss that tasted like coming home, Adrian realized that sometimes the best things in life were worth the wait, and worth fighting for. Chapter 8. New Beginnings. 6 months after the mating ceremony that had united not just 2 souls, but 2 packs in unprecedented harmony, Maya stood at the window of their shared office overlooking the expanded Midnight Ridge sanctuary. The morning sun cast golden light across dozens of enclosures where injured and orphaned wild animals recovered under her care, while in the distance, construction crews worked on the new Interpack medical facility that would serve the entire region. The transformation had been remarkable. What started as Adrian's estate veterinary clinic had evolved into something unprecedented, a network of sanctuaries connecting 5 different pack territories, all working together under Maya's guidance to bridge the gap between the supernatural and natural worlds. The Council of Alphas had initially been skeptical, but the results spoke for themselves. Territorial disputes had decreased by 70%, as packs found common ground in protecting the wildlife that moved freely between their lands. The quarterly reports look incredible, Adrian said, entering the office with 2 cups of coffee, and the satisfied expression of someone whose proudest achievements had nothing to do with corporate profits. 3 more packs want to join the sanctuary network, and Dr. Chen says the veterinary program applications are up 400% from last year. Maya accepted her coffee with a smile that still made Adrian's heart skip beats. The wild intensity in her eyes had softened over the months, but it never completely disappeared. A reminder of the power that thrummed just beneath her calm surface. She'd learned to control her abilities rather than hide from them, and the difference was breathtaking. "David Chen called this morning," Maya said, settling into the chair beside Adrian's desk rather than behind her own. The casual intimacy of shared space had become natural over the months of learning to work together as true partners. He's completed his first year of veterinary school with honors, and he wants to do his internship here next summer. Garrett's going to hate that, Adrian observed with dark satisfaction. The former Silver Creek Alpha had been forced to step down after losing half his pack to neighboring territories that offered more progressive leadership. His replacement, Alpha Sarah Morrison, his own daughter, had spent her first month in power apologizing to Maya and requesting Sanctuary Network membership. Garrett's opinion stopped mattering the day his own pack voted him out, Maya replied. David gets to choose his own path now, same as everyone else. Adrian set down his coffee and pulled Maya from her chair into his lap, a gesture that had become routine whenever they discussed the positive changes rippling through their world. She settled against him with the contentment of someone who had finally found where she belonged. Speaking of choosing paths, Adrian murmured against her hair, breathing in the wild honey scent that still drove him to distraction. Dr. Martinez called about your medical school application. Maya tensed slightly in his arms. The decision to pursue formal veterinary training had been difficult. She was already more effective with animals than most licensed veterinarians. But the legitimacy that came with official credentials would open doors for the Sanctuary Network that her natural abilities alone couldn't. "And?" she prompted, though her enhanced hearing had probably already caught the excitement in his voice. "Full scholarship to the University of Washington Veterinary Program, with permission to complete clinical rotations at our facilities," Adrian announced, unable to keep the pride from his voice. "They want to study your methods, maybe develop new approaches to wildlife rehabilitation." Maya was quiet for so long that Adrian began to worry he'd misread her feelings about the opportunity. Then she turned in his arms, her face shining with joy and something deeper. The confidence of someone who had finally learned to see her differences as gifts rather than curses. "I'll be gone 3 days a week for classes," she said. "The animals here, the sanctuary work. Can you handle the increased responsibility?" "We," Adrian corrected firmly. "We can handle anything as long as we're facing it together. Besides," he added with a grin that made Maya's pulse quicken, "I seem to remember promising to support your dreams no matter where they led." The kiss that followed was interrupted by a soft whining from the office doorway. They separated to find Artemis, the silver wolf Maya had rescued during that first storm. Watching them with patient amusement, the wolf had never returned to the wild, choosing instead to become Maya's constant companion and the unofficial mascot of the sanctuary. "She's reminding us that the new arrivals need attention," Maya said, with the kind of instant understanding that still amazed Adrian. The connection between Maya and wild creatures had only strengthened over the months, but it no longer frightened him. Instead, he'd learned to see it as part of what made her extraordinary. They walked hand in hand through the sanctuary grounds, greeting the various animals that called the facility home. Some were permanent residents, creatures too injured or imprinted to survive in the wild. Others were temporary guests, recovering from injuries or illness before being released back to their natural habitats. All of them responded to Maya's presence with the same reverence Adrian had witnessed that first day with the storm-driven wolves. The newest arrivals were a family of black bears, a mother and 2 cubs who had been separated during a forest fire in the neighboring territory. The cubs were healthy but traumatized, while their mother bore burns that would require weeks of careful treatment. Maya approached the enclosure with the same fearless grace she brought to every animal interaction. The mother bear, sedated for treatment but still alert, lifted her massive head as Maya entered the space. For a moment, predator and healer regarded each other with mutual assessment. Then the bear made a sound Adrian had never heard before, a low rumble that seemed to carry gratitude and trust in equal measure. Maya placed her hand on the animal's uninjured shoulder, and Adrian watched the tension leave the bear's body as healing energy passed between them. She knows her cubs are safe, Maya said softly, not taking her eyes off the bear. She can rest now. Adrian found himself thinking, not for the first time, that he was witnessing something miraculous. Not just Maya's abilities, but the ripple effects of her presence in the world. Every animal she helped, every pack member who learned to see differences as strengths rather than threats, every young shifter who grew up believing they could be valued for who they were, rather than feared for what they might become. Maya, he said quietly, waiting until she turned to face him before continuing. There's something I need to tell you. The serious tone in his voice made her step closer, her hand automatically reaching for his. What is it? Adrian took a deep breath, aware that what he was about to share would change everything again. Dr. Reynolds ran some additional tests after your last physical. The results, they're remarkable. What kind of results? Maya's voice carried a note of wariness that made Adrian realize he was handling this badly. You're pregnant, he said simply, then rushed to explain as Maya's face went through a series of expressions he couldn't quite read. About 8 weeks along, she thinks. The baby is developing normally, but there are some unique characteristics that suggest what? Maya's voice was barely above a whisper. That our child might be the first alpha-level beast whisperer born in over 2 centuries. Adrian finished. The genetic markers are unlike anything on record. Maya sank onto a nearby bench, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. Adrian sat beside her, giving her space to process while remaining close enough to offer support. An alpha beast whisperer, she repeated slowly. Do you have any idea what that means? The kind of power, the responsibility, the expectations? I know it means our daughter will grow up in a world that's learning to celebrate differences instead of fear them. Adrian said gently. I know she'll have parents who understand what it's like to be different, who can teach her to use her gifts wisely. Daughter? Maya looked up with surprise. Dr. Reynolds could tell the gender already? Adrian's smile was soft with wonder. Apparently, shifter pregnancies progress slightly differently than human ones. We're having a little girl, Maya. A little girl who's going to change the world just like her mother did. Tears gathered in Maya's golden eyes. Not from fear or uncertainty, but from overwhelming joy. She'll never have to hide what she is, Maya said with fierce protectiveness. Never have to apologize for her gifts or pretend to be less than she is. Never, Adrian agreed, pulling her close. And she'll grow up knowing that being different makes her special, not dangerous. As if sensing the significance of the moment, Artemis padded over to join them on the bench. The wolf rested her massive head on Maya's lap, her intelligent yellow eyes seeming to offer congratulations and protection in equal measure. The sanctuary network will need to expand again, Maya said eventually, her practical mind already working through implications. If there are other children like her being born, they'll need safe spaces to learn and grow. Then we'll expand it, Adrian said simply. Whatever she needs, whatever any of them need, we'll make it happen. Maya leaned back against Adrian's chest, watching the rescued bear cubs play in their enclosure, while their mother rested peacefully nearby. The late afternoon sun cast everything in golden light, making the entire sanctuary look like something from a fairy tale. You know what I think? Maya said, her voice filled with contentment and anticipation. What? I think our daughter is going to be born into exactly the right world at exactly the right time, Maya replied. A world where beast whisperers are bridges instead of threats, where being different is celebrated instead of feared, where love is stronger than prejudice. Adrian pressed a kiss to the top of her head, breathing in the scent of wild honey and new beginnings. I think you're right. I think she's going to be amazing. As they sat together in comfortable silence, surrounded by the animals Maya had saved and the sanctuary they'd built together, Adrian realized that this was what happiness looked like. Not the dramatic passion of their early relationship or the intense drama of their separation and reunion, but this quiet certainty that they were exactly where they belonged. In the distance, a wolf howled, wild and free and unafraid. Within moments, others joined the song, creating a symphony that seemed to celebrate not just the end of day, but the beginning of a new chapter in their extraordinary love story. Maya's hand found Adrian's, their fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever new adventures awaited their growing family, they would face them together. And that, Adrian knew, made them unstoppable. The future stretched before them like an unwritten book, its pages filled with infinite possibility and the promise of love that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger than ever. As the sun set over Midnight Ridge Sanctuary, casting long shadows across the land they had claimed and transformed together, Maya and Adrian began planning for tomorrow, and for all the tomorrows that would follow. The supernatural world is filled with souls still searching for their place, rejected shifters seeking acceptance, powerful beings learning to embrace their gifts, hearts yearning for love that sees beyond the surface. These untold stories are waiting for you. If Maya's journey from outcast to powerful Luna moved you, if Adrian's transformation from controller to true partner inspired you, then you know there's magic in every tale of love conquering fear. Share your thoughts below. Which moment touched your heart most? Your time with us tonight means everything. Hit that subscribe button and join our pack. Ring the notification bell so you never miss our next supernatural love story filled with forbidden romance, ancient powers, and bonds that defy all odds. Until the moon brings us together again, thank you for believing in love without limits.